Big Descriptions disrupts traditional educational methods. And why do we do that? Because we want to help humans thrive where they are, building better communities. One way that we do that is the Elephant in the Room Unboxed, where we give our audience members the tools and the resources to have those uncomfortable conversations and do it in a humane and anthropological way. We're doing this in partnership with Respect Diversity, another organization that is committed to doing the work with us. Each episode will have a different host and a different guest talking about uncomfortable conversations or uncomfortable topics and giving you the resources of how to navigate them. Let's get uncomfortable.
I am Dr. Noel Jacobs. I am a health service psychologist, and I am executive director of the Respect Diversity Foundation here in Oklahoma City. Our second guest for the podcast Elephant in the Room Unboxed is Jill Nagle. She is a multiply published author, coach, facilitator, and founder of Evolutionary Workplace. She uses somatic tools to help leaders dismantle white supremacy and other ills from the inside out, which in turn helps us to become more whole. She aims to help reduce harm to Black and brown people, as well as support white people in liberating themselves from the effects of white supremacy's toxic mythology. Currently, she is working on 2 books about racism. Welcome to our show, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Jill, please tell us a little bit more about yourself than what I just read and more about what you do.
Sure. I work with leaders and anyone interested in taking leadership by any kind of influence, whether it's in a single conversation that lasts 30 seconds or in leading a massive organization or team. We all have opportunities for leadership. So I work with people who think of themselves as leaders and people who don't think of themselves as leaders, who want to make more of a difference in dismantling white supremacy mythology.
That is awesome.
White supremacy mythology is itself kind of a phrase that sparks questions, because sometimes the first reaction is, what do you mean mythology? White supremacy is real. And so I want to break it down a little bit. As you may know, white itself is a fiction that was developed solely for the purpose of oppression. It was created to separate one group of enslaved peoples, from the Irish, really, from another, those of African descent, because they were about to get together and foment a rebellion. And creating whiteness stopped that, as it privileged the light-skinned people with more desirable enslaved jobs. There's a great book called How the Irish Became White by Noel that goes into that history. So whiteness itself is a mythology that's become, whose effects are very real. It's become a social reality that we live with. And supremacy has a couple of different meanings. One of them is to actually be superior to. Another one is to reign supreme because of outside forces. Like, might makes right.
Or divine right.
Divine, like manifest destiny was a prime example of white supremacy mythology. Light-skinned people of European descent came to this country and decimated indigenous populations, invoking this divine authority of manifest destiny. It wasn't true. Nobody gave them the right to do that. It was a justification. And so supremacy, the reason we attach the phrase mythology to supremacy is it isn't true. White people are not superior to anybody else. But mythology also has another connotation, which is the beliefs and the attitudes and the behaviors that suffuse a culture and by which we go about our lives. So there's a kind of mythology that's sort of in the air and kind of invisible. For example, up until recently, the only examples of superheroes we saw were people who looked like you and me, maybe a little more buff than me, but and up until very recently. And so part of the mythology that suffuses this culture is that all that is good, worthwhile, meritorious, trustworthy, beautiful, that all comes in a light-skinned package of European descent. So white supremacy mythology is the untrue notion that light-skinned people of European descent are superior to others and should be given all kinds of perks accordingly.
And it seems like in some conversations, it even is the argument for why we don't need to do anything different now to correct the past or try to work against the problems that have happened. As a psychologist, I see this term cognitive dissonance, and how when
Yes.
we're faced with something that is uncomfortable for us about our behavior that might reflect on our character, we have to find a way to sleep at night. We have to find a way to be okay again. And our mind goes through hoops to try to help us feel justified in what's already happened, or at least our need not to make corrections based on that. How do you see that in our society now?
Well, I think that's where your work probably overlaps with mine. And one of the books that I'm working on, called Skin in the Game: How White People Benefit from Dismantling White Supremacy, I talk about a lot about that the one of the main effects of white supremacy mythology on the minds of white people is that it produces in us a predictable and visible set of mindsets that I call the white supremacy mythology mindset continuum. And I know that's a mouthful, but what it basically means is that kind of like members of a dysfunctional family, when there's something going on that's wrong, we all take these different roles. Some people act it out directly. Some people deny it and cover it up and pretend that it isn't there. Some people, like me, try to fix it. And you can if you look around, you can kind of see who's doing what. You know, the overt folks, like those putting on white hoods and burning crosses on lawns, are different from those who are like, la la la, I can't hear you, I don't see color, I'm not racist. If you're talking about race, then you're the problem, you know.
Right.
And it's funny because in one of my white on white workshops, a woman in her 70s looked at this chart that I gave out of the sort of behaviors or symptoms, if you will, of the different mindsets. And she looked at the, you know, the denial one. She's like, this is verbatim, word for word, what my family told me growing up.
Oh,
She was
mercy.
like blown away.
And another parallel here in psychology, we look at family systems, and structural family system says each of us has a role to play to keep things the same. We want homeostasis. We want things to be the same tomorrow that they were today, because we get comfort from predictability. So we play these roles to keep our society where it is, it sounds like. Well,
I'm really hoping to change things.
Yes.
Probably no accident that my family of origin system also didn't work for me. that kind of fits in with what you're saying. And so to undergird and kind of contextualize what you're saying, I want to bring into the room, or the virtual room that we've created here,
Sure.
the word belonging. And I think that permeates this work in so many ways. Its theme is being addressed in a lot of different books that are coming out. And Braiding Sweetgrass, the author talks about belonging. There's a book that I've used in my leadership program called Belonging by Toko-Pa Turner. And so when you talk about staying the same, what strikes me is, I wonder if family members who want the family to stay the same are wanting to preserve the place of belonging. And I wonder if some of the folks who are defending whiteness so vociferously are wanting to belong to their ancestral line who committed all these atrocities, because no matter how badly the great-grandfather, great, acted, they're still part of their family. And another thing, it gets even deeper here. Another thing that strikes me about belonging is that everybody here in the United States of America has an extremely fraught relationship with belonging to this land. If you start with indigenous people who had this, beautiful relationship of belonging with the bison and the fish and the fowl and the plants, and along came people of European descent who called them savages and killed them and stole from them, who were also kind of like an invasive species kind of taking over. And so the indigenous people's sense of belonging, the whole culture was interrupted. And the people, light-skinned people of European descent who came here did not have an indigenous relationship to the land and took it over. And so So their relationship with belonging is also fraught. And then, of course, people of African descent who were kidnapped and tortured and enslaved were brought here against their will in a culture and soil and air and water foreign to them. And so they have a fraught relationship with belonging. And so
Sure.
everybody in this culture has and my ancestors came fleeing pogroms and trying to stay alive in the face of fatal anti-Semitism. And saying goes, Jews have been treated at best as guests wherever we are.
Right.
And some of the ways that white supremacy mythology in this country plays out is directly against Jews. And it remains to be seen, where all that is going to go.
Sure.
So no one here has a straightforward, unfettered, pristine relationship to belonging.
And the work that you're doing, because I do want to get to kind of the concrete nuts and bolts of what you try to help organizations do. Mm-hmm. You mention in your own writings the term DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Yeah. And I have seen up to this point in the organizations that I've been connected with, we talk about DEI councils, so diversity, equity, and inclusion councils, missing that B. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like your goal is for everyone, not just people who, in a sense, within majority culture have not felt belonging, but everybody to feel belonging, including those who have typically historically had it. Mm. How does that work? How do you create belonging for people who haven't felt it? And how do you preserve, in a sense, the sense of entitlement and belonging for people who, because of the changes that we talk about when we're doing this kind of work, make some people scared that they're going to lose their belonging?
Mm-hmm. I think entitlement and belonging are two different things. Mm-hmm. One of the things that happens in this culture is we kind of get sold swap outs or substitutes. For example, we're told that we should save all this money in our 401k for security.
Sure.
Which is essentially lending money to the 1%. Instead of like a true sense of interdependence and abundance that would come from leaning into all that we actually have, rather than an abstracted representation of something we might have, aka money.
Right.
So I wouldn't say entitlement is belonging. The reason that my tagline is dismantling white supremacy from the inside out is that, as Resmaa Menakem talks about in his books, My Grandmother's Hands and The Quaking of America, and in his one-on-one work, history lives in our bodies. And everything we've ever experienced, as you know, as a psychologist in our lives, shows up in our psyches and in our bodies. Sure. And so, for example, in Dr. Cleo Manago's and my leadership program, and over the 9 months that we did the last time, we spent the first 6 months just on the inner work. And by that, I mean, first, we look at what happens when a stimulus from the outside hits our bodies. And we look at the Neo-Reichian character structures of, do we leave? Do we hunker down and try to hide out? Do we fight it? Do we tend to befriend? Those responses also map onto trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze,
absolutely,
and fawn. And so if we don't know what our conditioned responses are, and we don't work with them, then we're at the mercy of our reactions and whatever happens around us. And so we do some of that foundational work in looking at, well, what are our conditioned responses? And how can we step back from that, get to a place of centeredness, and make a true choice? Because until we can do that, we're not necessarily going to have the tools to be in alignment with the kind of world that we want to create. We're going to be bouncing around and reacting to things.
Sure. Still not with any conscious level of understanding or control.
Exactly. And doing work around race and being racialized and how we get racialized and racialize others just highlights that. And so that's why you can be in a room and feel like there's a lot of confusion. Well, that's a part of what contributes to things not working when we try to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing we look at is our own ancestral line and belonging to who and what actually brought us here. Each one of us has not only our own specific ancestral line of parents and grandparents and so on all the way back, but also a trajectory of what brought us to this land.
Mm.
You know, I belong to a history of people fleeing. I
Sure.
belong to a history of people feeling like they don't belong and expressing fear and anxiety and creativity in particular ways. That's part of what makes me Jewish, and that's part of what makes me who I am. Mine is different from yours, is different from Suzette's, different from Kyle's, different from a person of African descent, from a person of Irish descent.
Sure.
So knowing not just general history and not just our own, familial history, but how those intersect, like how did history impact my ancestral line? How does it show up in my family?
Mm-hmm.
How does it show up in me? So that's the second piece of it. Another piece of it is developing literacy in how white supremacy mythology is expressing itself around us and starting to be able to discern what's what, because that's
Sure.
another part of our conditioning. For example, it's kind of hidden in plain sight a lot of times, and it can be very seductive because it's often wrapped up in like really good entertainment. For example, I love the show The Orville, which bills itself as a parody of Star Trek, but it's
Yeah.
more than a parody. It's not just silly. It's actually really, really good in and of it. So, in its own right. So one of the episodes involved a matriarchal culture that was an offshoot of an all male culture called the Nagle. And so this where the Nagle basically doesn't allow females, and they want to kill them at birth. And so this one wise woman was like rescuing all the female babies
Mm-hmm.
and caring for them in the separate village. And the culture is very African-esque. I believe they have actors of African descent playing the characters, and they're very evocative of sort of African descended people.
Okay.
And so when one of the white crew co-captains or assistant captain, I forget what they're called, first officer, went to visit this old wise Mocklin woman, she went into her inner sanctum where she had this altar. And on the altar were all these pictures of, wait for it, Dolly Parton. Right? It was really funny. It was precious. It was hilarious. And when the Mocklin matriarch has this moment of truth, she goes into the holodeck and she sits down with Dolly Parton.
That's
and,
wild.
And she, Dolly Parton is this wise woman, and Dolly Parton helps her to kind of come to her conscience, right? And so in story structure, Dolly Parton is the apex of the wise woman, who this African descended woman has to go to get the truth. And she's a person that she worships. And, at first blush, it's hilarious. It's really funny. I love Dolly Parton, nothing against Dolly Parton.
Sure.
And it's pure white supremacy mythology. That a wise, seasoned, veteran leader has to go to a white country star from thousands of years ago to get the truth.
In spite of their own culture's history. And yes, wow.
And it also holds up the thesis of the book that Ijeoma Oluo, in her book Mediocrity, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America, puts forth, which is that white, and she's talking about male mediocrity, but like white mediocrity is held up as so much better than anything black or brown. Right. And so, my partner's listening to this. He's like, he really wants to enjoy the show. And so do I, but I just can't. I have to have my little rant right in the middle and yell at the TV. It was very well written. Again, I love Dolly Parton, but perfect example of white supremacy mythology right there in front of us.
It's always there in the background, ready to show up.
Or in the foreground, yelling and asserting itself.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong direct contact with it.
And it's everywhere. That's the thing. So that's the third thing that we do in coaching is we invite people to go and look around. Like Dr. Cleomenago asks the participants to go take a look at the movie Impact. impact or deep impact with Morgan Freeman about an asteroid coming to hit
Oh,
the
sure.
Earth.
Deep impact. Yeah.
Yeah, and just take a look at what you see there, what you notice, and nobody got everything. I mean, even though we're all now really hyper aware and trying to look at it, I didn't get everything. I didn't notice all of the little choices that were made that devalue Black people and elevate white people.
Mm-hmm. So we're surrounded by this and so used to it within broader culture.
Yeah. Well, so you were asking what are some of the things we do in organizations and work with people, and one is looking at our own patterns. Another, polishing our lens for how we perceive white supremacy mythology around us. Another is finding our own place in all of this, because there are some people who say there's too much navel gazing among white people going on. Book clubs is not going to do anything. We need to change policy and practice. And that's all true.
Sure.
And at the same time, we all have different skill sets, different gifts, different levels of tolerance, and all this sort of thing, different muscles, if you will. And there are so many ways that white people can make a difference in all of this, whether it's through art, through working with other white people. And any one of us can be a leader. I mean, if we start a conversation, with Uncle Fred at Thanksgiving, and that conversation, shifts things in some tiny way, which we might not even be able to see, that's leadership.
Right. Like planting seeds of trees under whose shade we will never sit.
Exactly. And so the more that we can, and that's one thing that, white people that I know struggle the most with is, well, I don't want to talk to that other white person. I don't want to talk to my friend Susie from high school. I just unfriended her because she's so racist. Well, as Asia Davis of the Human Potential Project and the White People Doing Something group says, she's a woman of African descent. When white people say, oh, I don't want to talk to that other white person, they're so racist, they're so horrible, she says, well, one less racist in your life is not one less racist in my life.
Wow. That is powerful.
Yeah. So as white people, we have the privilege to, and often the entitlement to, distance ourselves from people whose views bother us. If we're anti-racist, we might not want to hang around people we think are racist. And yet we're abdicating in a very important and potent use of our white privilege when we decide not to have those conversations. And I'm not telling people who to talk to, when, or what, but I'm saying, notice that.
Sure. In a sense, it's a passive acceptance that we don't see the number having to change or being a part of the change process itself.
And we're also doing something that I credit Cleo Nagle with pointing out to me. We're dissociating. A lot of times when people show, hilarious or despicable Twitter racist things, look how horrible this is, and everybody piles on, oh yeah, that's so horrible. It's like we're dissociating ourselves from it. We're saying, subtext, I'm a good white person. I would never say that. Look at this horrible white person who is.
Right. I'm not them.
Yeah.
And yet we're not doing anything to change that, which is why somebody who's white like me can leave that group, but it doesn't affect anybody else in a positive way. I have the privilege and the luxury of leaving that space, whereas other people are forced to stay in it.
Yeah. And so the motto that we use is stumble forward, because, everything that I've said could be taken as a recipe for paralysis, meaning, this is dissociating and this is, accommodating, and I can't do this because it's that. And, as we are unfolding this cultural moment and noticing all the ways that white supremacy mythology appears around us, and all the ways that we thought we were making it better, but we might be making it worse, and all the ways that we might actually be making it worse, it can be easy to just kind of step back and go, I don't know what to do next. I'm going to do it wrong. And we're all going to mess up. And there's no one thing that anyone can do that everyone's going to approve of. Like when you find the best toaster, Consumer Reports tells you, oh, this toaster's great, I'm going to go get it. And then you look on Amazon, and there's always like 3% of the people give it just 1 star.
Sure.
There's always going to be that. Go on Amazon. Everything that's fantastic always has some naysayers.
So we should be authentically trying to do the work.
I think so.
Realizing
I'd say stumble forward.
Yeah. Realizing we'll make mistakes, needing forgiveness, needing the ability to continue to try to stay in it and do it.
Yeah. And that's another foundation of the work that we do, is something that I call being withness, which is very similar to the state that you get in when you're doing mindfulness meditation. But since that's not my tradition, I don't feel like I can claim that. So I call it being withness. Like, how do we be with when the shit is flying all around us? How do we come out of pattern and into presence and do something or not do something? Sometimes just being with is what we do, but how do we show up in ways that help or at least don't harm?
That can be deeply uncomfortable to sit and to experience fully and not try to mitigate, change, deny, undo. What is the best way that you've seen to help people get to the place where they can be in the being with, even when they can't fix it?
Practice. And so one of the things we do, both in my short workshops and in longer programs, is what I call rewinds and fast forwards. And a rewind is simply where you go back to a situation and we recreate it by proxy, and you get to take your time, you get to feel your feelings, you get to do everything you can't do because life doesn't have a pause button, So we kind of pause and go, oh man, I'm feeling like crap right now. And I counsel them through it. And they find another place in themselves, like we literally lay down neural pathways so that they can go back and say, whether it's to their spouse or relative or coworker, and say, hey, can we have a do-over on that? Or, the other day when you said that, I realized and that's where the fast forward comes in, is if there's a conversation that you're anticipating having or would like to have or think you might find yourself in sometime in the future, like if you're going home for the holidays, we'll have somebody play the role of that other person. And again, we have a pause button so you can feel your feelings, rewind, see what's propelling you into the conversation that you don't want to have, come back to a place of presence and start to make other choices that might feel new and different. But with enough practice, you can lay down those new neural pathways and go and have those transformative conversations that you maybe have been wanting to, but never had a chance to kind of lay those tracks down.
That's awesome. And it is so much like the work of a cognitive behavioral psychologist.
Yes.
You're undoing the linkage between attitudes, beliefs, and thoughts, and then the behaviors that can perpetuate the bad systems that we're trying to change.
What you said.
That's incredible work. And just so that our listeners can understand, is this at the individual level always? Are you doing this at the organizational level, in groups at times? How do you make this change in the role of Evolutionary Workplace?
So you mean like, how does something like this scale?
Yeah.
So in a white on white workshop, for example, which is about white people having conversations with other white people. We start at the very beginning with a prompt that is designed to be provocative. Like, for example, someone who cares about race gets told, racism isn't a problem anymore. You're actually the problem because you're bringing it up. You're causing division here. Like, take a simple statement like that. Well, you're the problem. And then we'll slow down. We'll have them get into small groups and track out loud what's actually happening in their body and what stories they're telling themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're activating different levels of attention, visceral, cognitive, emotional.
Yeah, because how often in life do we get to do that? Like, I can give you an example. So why don't you just tell me, or I can do it with you if you would prefer. Say, Jill, you're the problem because you're the one bringing up race issues.
Sure. And Jill, you do this work. You're trying to put it in front of people, and that causes them the problems that you're talking about. How can you not see that you're the problem? So
what I'm noticing is like I'm noticing the activation in my heart and sadness. Like I just want to cry and I want to defend myself and want to say things like, you're not seeing me. I'm working so hard, and so what I'm becoming aware of is this deep need in me to be seen. And so if I were a third person working with me as a client, I would say, let's give that to you. Let's give that to you right now. Let's find a way for you to give that to yourself. And let's find what it feels like in your body to actually be seen, because that's the need. And if I'm in a conversation with you, trying to meet an old need of my own that I'm not aware of, I'm not going to be doing this transformational work.
Sure.
But that's not to say there's anything wrong with it. We're all imperfect human beings with unmet needs, walking around unconsciously trying to meet them all the time. You're a psychologist, you know this.
Absolutely.
But if we want to do this work better, we do need to slow down. We do need to tune into what is happening to us when a stimulus hits our system, especially a stimulus having to do with racialized reality in the United States of America. Because what happens is that racialized reality is full of, in Yiddish we say mishigas, craziness of its own, and that braids with our individual, familial, historical trauma, and it lives in us in ways that we just react, right? Like I would want to come back. You don't see all the work that I do. I'm not a problem. So instead, what I'm going to do is take my time, come back to center. And the default that we use and we have in our back pocket, because most people aren't going to get completely enlightened this lifetime, is to kind of lean in and cock our head over and say, can you tell me more about that? And for most people, that's very disarming. They aren't used to someone reacting to them like that. They're used to someone arguing with them, telling them they're wrong. And then you have two, egos defending each other and trying to make the other person wrong. And so if we kind of lean in and get curious, then what we invite is the possibility. I'm not saying there are any guarantees, but we invite the possibility of a transformational experience for the other person, where they might actually be able to unravel where some of their learning about racialized mythology and reality and their hurts, where those got woven in together. And if I say, hey, can you tell me more about that? Then they have a chance to know, why do I believe this? Whereas if I just make them wrong, I'm dissociating, I'm staying in pattern, and nothing has changed.
Absolutely. Well, and you're also, and this is me nerding out as a psychologist again, when we have moments of potential conflict, we have the sensory experience, it goes to the thalamus, and then it can go straight to the limbic system, which is our fight or flight system. The goal of interrupting that is actually to take people from the senses to the thalamus up into the cortex, where we do our thinking, where we actually have deliberate thought, and we have more control. Yeah. And as soon as we do that, you actually start to see people's actual body metrics change. Heart rate goes down a bit, and it can stay down if you keep engaging the cortex. And you're bypassing that one line for the two line system. It takes longer, but it's intentional, and it allows you to escape the trap of the fight or flight moment where your adrenaline builds up. And now you really are ready for a conflict. And both people are probably going to go further down that road. So in a sense, your work is diffusing that part to give people just a long enough time to think and re-engage systems that can help them through it and lead to a greater possibility of change.
Yes. And to the head part, I would also add heart. I often will have people put a hand on their heart and a hand on their belly. And I'm bringing in my work as a somatic counselor here.
Yes.
And to bring in the longings of the heart. What do you really want? And especially if they're feeling disempowered, to literally feel the fire in their belly of what kind of world that you want, and is even driving you to be here right now to do this work.
Absolutely. That is so good. We have just a few minutes left, and there are way more questions. I wish we had an hour, maybe a half day to spend time doing together. So what do you see as the structural changes that are still needed to address these very issues? White fragility, avoidance of anti-racist work in spaces larger than organizations. And what more can or should we as a society be doing?
Well, when you say structural, I know there are people who are very gifted in policy work on a high level, and I think that work needs to continue. Where I'm drawn to, and I think my gifts and contributions lie, is in somewhere, I need a word for it. Maybe you can help me out. Sort of like a like cultural psychology, language, somewhere in the intersection of all those things.
Sure.
And when you say the structural need, I say, I want to work at the fulcrum. And what I think we need to do is disengage our attachment to strategies and get more in touch with our needs.
Okay.
For example, at the root of a lot of white power movement and its offshoots, and when I say it's offshoots, I mean things that may not call themselves white power, but at whose root lies deep concern with white power in the sense of our ranks are dwindling.
Sure.
There's actual anxiety about ethnic annihilation. And so what I would like to do, perhaps through a series of slow conversations with people who represent this view and maybe are able to reflect on it, is what's up with that? What would be the worst thing that could happen if all white people died off? What would that mean for you? What does that feel like to hold?
Sure.
Because and this is why I keep going back from the inside out, because you can change policies, you can change, the consequences for behavior, but if people are still the same, and you can even argue that those will change people on the inside, and they might.
Right.
But I'm really curious about what's up with that, Why is it important to you to preserve the quote unquote white race? What would it mean for you if we died off? Let's talk about that.
It's existential dialogue. It is that idea that there is something that tethers us to something greater, and there are lots of different forms that the greater takes, but one of them is that idea of, in a sense, cultural lineage. You're speaking your own history, your family's pathway, at least parts of it, and those pathways are important to you. And you've used the word mythology, and I can see so much that we don't know everything, and we sort of fill in the gaps. Our minds need to fill in the gaps. So when we've created that structure, and some groups, individuals, systems are giving us messages that that's about to go away, that is a form of existential terror.
Yeah, and I want to have empathy for that. I want to create space for exploring what that means for people, how it lives in our bodies, and how can we bring that concern into our lives in ways that are not damaging to others.
Absolutely. Well, and what's beautiful about that is the formal existential psychology says it in the end always and only can come down to you, the legacy that you leave, the impact that you have, and there's no assumption that you'll have an impact on the entire world, but the legacy that you leave weaves its way through the world and the people that you've touched, that you've changed. So this work that you're doing has so many ways out that will be permanent and restorative and help the future in ways that you'll never see.
So.
Absolutely.
And in Jewish tradition, we don't have emphasis on the idea of heaven or an afterlife so much as carrying on the work of people who have died. And I see that with my Aunt Phyllis, who is a white Jewish woman who integrated a segregated bus in the South in 1946 at the age of 19, and went on to found and chair a Black Studies department for 25 years at a local community college. And all along she said, if ever a Black person wants to come along and take this over, I will gladly step aside, but no one ever did.
Oh, wow. Wow. But it was worth it to create that space in the time that she had. Yeah.
She was totally in her element.
That's awesome. I am so thankful that you've been with us and grateful for the work that you do. Know that, what we have just spoken about, and I will resonate with this idea of belonging that you have put in front of us, because we can and should have it. All of us can and should have it. And I'm thankful that you're trying to create that work and helping people that have place see where they are and create and help not only retain their own, but make sure that other people have an opportunity for that as well. So thank you.
So lovely to talk with you.
Great to talk with you as well. We will find a way through our friend Suzette to have more time together. I really appreciate this.
Indeed. I would love that.
Terrific. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you for listening to Thick Descriptions, Elephant in the Room Unboxed. Want to learn more about us, what we're doing to disrupt traditional educational methods? Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. thickdescriptions.org, 405-397-0584.